Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum. I received an inquiry regarding Surah 78, verse 33, the verse that reads, وَكَوَاعِبَ أَتْرَابًا. And although I have addressed this particular verse very briefly in my video about Hur'een, it does deserve its own video. So this verse, when we read it in context, does refer to rewards in paradise. And as usual, in traditional Islam, the translation of this verse is very problematic. Reading the verse before, God speaks of rewards in paradise. He says, حَدَائِقَ أَعْنَابًا, we will receive gardens and vineyards. Then he says, we will also receive كَوَاعِبَ أَتْرَابًا. And then he says, وَكَأْسًا دِهَاقًا, cups that are overflowing. Now, the traditional translation of Kawa'ib Atraba is that it's referring to breasts, women's breasts. Here, Muhammad As'ad's translation is a very nice one. He says, splendid companions that are well matched. But if we look at, if we go to the website Islam Awakened that has over 40 different translations of the Quranic verses, we will see where they are talking about women's breasts. Okay, so let's just kind of scroll through this page. And full-bosomed maidens of equal age, young maidens of equal age, full-breasted maidens of the same age. So as we can see, the vast majority of them are referring to women's breasts or virgins, something along those lines. So this, again, is a problematic type of translation simply because it does not make sense. It's an oddity within a context. Why is God talking about gardens and grapes, then he talks about breasts, then he talks about cups? It simply does not make sense. Something is off. So let's begin by addressing each of these terms. They are two terms, kawa'ib, atraba. Now the Arabic word kawa'ib comes from the root ka'aba. Okay, Ka'ba or Ka'aba is basically anything that joins with something else and creates some type of protrusion. This is why the heel of a foot is called a Ka'b. Actually, any joint in the body is technically a Ka'b. As we can see here in Lane's lexicon, any joint, a juncture or place of division of the bones is considered a Ka'b. However, we need to pay attention here simply to the context. So God here is telling us that we are receiving gardens and vineyards and protrusions. Protrusions. So what are these protrusions? Well, we know that God is talking about gardens and vineyards. And so obviously the context must dictate what is going on here. And if we simply dig through Lane's lexicon, and this is also found in Lisan al-Arab, look over here. A piece of clarified butter, such as a lump or compact piece, okay? And then it says, and a lump of dates compacted together. So this indicates for us that the Arabic word kawa'ib is not, based off of the context, is not referring to women's breasts. Rather, we are simply taking the context as an indicator as to what's going on. God says gardens and vineyards and protrusions. It's in reference to whatever's mentioned previously. The protrusions of the plants, the grapes, the fruits, whatever it may be, it's in reference to the context, not of some random breasts that are, obviously someone that's quite perverted decided to translate it that way. So the protrusions here is in reference to the fruits that are actually mentioned in the context. Nothing to do with breasts. And I'll take you also here to Lisan al-Arab, okay, which also says here in regards to the grapes, a compact form of grapes. Nothing to do with breasts. And then God says that these compacted fruits or whatever it may be, atraba. And I've already addressed this in the previous video about myth of virgins in paradise. Atraba simply means has equal characteristics. So the protrusions of grapes or fruits are of equal characteristics, equal in size, equal in height, or whatever it may be. Nothing to do with breasts. Now, just as a final thing I want to show you is that if we look at the monotheist group translation of this verse, they have done a good job here. Bunches that are ripe. At least that's closer than what we have been seeing in the traditional translations. So, taking the context into consideration, we will receive gardens and vineyards and bunches that are ripe and a cup that is full. This is a closer translation and a more sound translation than what we have seen in the traditional understanding. I pray that this has clarified for you what Surah 78, verse 33 is talking about. Wassalamu alaikum.